Hey guys, Disletter Magic here, and it's far past time to make another video about this. The number one worst thing in Magic, the worst mistake in the design of Magic, besides, well, basically just Wizards of the Coast as a company, just in general, is definitely lands being cards in the deck. They shouldn't be. It's really that simple. They should not be. It's a design flaw and it's stupid. So basically every time you get mana screwed, you lose and there's nothing you can do about it. No amount of skill or decision making or anything. And I would even say people blame it on deck building. Like they're like, well, you should have built your deck better. Okay, well, there's 24 lands in it, so no. In fact, the last person from my LGS from hell that said that, I replied with, okay, I would literally have to put 55 lands in my deck to assure myself, to make it impossible that I would not start with at least 2 lands. So if you have the proper amount of lands appropriate for the mana curve and the importance of the 3+ spells and all the other considerations, then you built your deck correctly. Guess what? The mana screw monster is still going to track you down and find you eventually. So nobody likes getting mana screwed. Oh, but it's part of the game. Well, let's oh my god, let's just debunk the whole damn list. Oh, it's just part of the game. Well, gee, it's such a fun part of the game. Yeah, it's great. It's my favorite part. I already said this. It's the worst part of the game. You start a game and you can't play the game because you're stuck with 2 lands. And if you kept a 1-lander, that's on you. In an average deck, there is almost no circumstance where you would ever do that. So stop doing that. Oh, but that's why there's 2 out of 3 instead of just, single matches. Well, 1, not in every format, and 2, it's even less of a sure thing that the best man and the best deck will win. And I mean man in like the original Latin root of English term, I know women play Magic too, stop getting triggered. So we covered you should have built your deck better. We covered, oh, it's 2 out of 3 and that's the reason. It makes the game more dynamic. Without it, if we were guaranteed 1 mana on turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., then ramping would be too easy, the game would be boring, and it would, and this is mathematically true, it would devolve into one deck is the best, the end. I mean, if somebody just gets a little bit stalled out on mana on their 3rd mana drop, their 4th one, their 5th one even, they could lose because of it. So it adds variance. It lets slightly less powerful decks, or not even less powerful, just a bad matchup, just a deck that isn't a good match for another one, it stands a disadvantage. You might win if you get just the perfect amount of land drops and they don't. So it does add dynamicness, it adds unpredictability, which kind of adds fun and fairness, I guess you would say. But I have to debunk that by saying, well, only one person is having a good time if the other person is stuck at 2 lands and it's 6 turns in and you still have 2 lands. I mean, when you sit down to play with a deck you just built, you should be able to, play the deck you just built. So what else do people say? Oh, build a cheaper deck. Okay, I'll just have absolutely no spells that cost above 2 that are crucial or remotely important to the deck. Yeah, that's how I'll build every deck from now on. Sure. I'm sure I've heard even dumber things said about this, but let's move on to what are the solutions, or is there one? Well, I have heard that virtually every other game just does not use lands. Like they'll use energy basically, or whatever, tiers or like time counters, or just whatever. I mean, I don't really play any other TCGs, but I heard that Hearthstone is just, oh, turn 1 you have 1 mana available, turn 2 you have 2 mana, or it's like you can cast like a tier 2 spell on turn 2 or whatever, something like that. Yu-Gi-Oh, they just don't use it at all. Which is why decks win on turn 2 and the best deck is very, very clear and provable. But no surprise here, Yu-Gi-Oh was designed and managed like crap. I do believe Force of Will uses a similar system where it's like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 equals, tiers or mana or energy, whatever. I don't know, maybe Vanguard's that way too. I don't know, I haven't looked into them. But honestly, in Hearthstone, it's like, here's how you build this deck. This is the mathematically ideal way to do it, instead of, well, if I get to my 5th mana, I can do this, but if I don't, I have a backup plan, but I have to think, because then I'm like, oh, well, I could cast these 2 costs now, but I don't have enough to do the 2 and the 3, so then I have to wait a turn to do this, and it just adds variance to a deck that would perform exactly the same way over and over and over within reason, if you are guaranteed 1 mana per turn. So I don't really think that that's the solution. So maybe let's look at how they fixed other things. If you mulligan to 6, you would lose the game. The vast majority of the time, that was a factual statement. Like, you were at such a mathematical disadvantage if they started with 7 and you started with 6. I can't even begin to describe it. So what they do, 6 and a scry so that you're still considering 7 cards. So that at least if your 6 card pull is, well, subpar, if it's garbage you're going to 5, but if it's very, very subpar, or if the only thing wrong with it is the land count, you can just get an additional 1/3 of a land out of the way that isn't a land, because 1 in 3 cards approximately in your deck are lands. So if you get to look at one, you're like, that's not a land, boom, you just progressed yourself, and it is progressive. The probability doesn't fully reset every turn. You progressed yourself towards another land. Now, it's not fully progressive either. I should throw that out there for all you math experts. So because, 1 and 2 cost spells are, they can be good, but honestly, the real power starts at 3. And you can almost say, oh, the real power starts at 6, but I mean, 1 costs are almost universally crap. Once in a while, you get some kind of, what was that hero thing from Theros? So right now, Dauntless Bodyguard's a 2/1 for 1 with the special ability. I mean, you get stuff like that. Llanowar Elves, absolutely crucial. And there's some killer 2 costs out there, but they're very limited. You go to Modern and there's a ton of them, but you go to just Standard, they don't just dump all the power into 2 costs, or people will build overpowered, way too fast decks. But 3 is okay, and I think the reason behind that is because it's really hard to get to 6 mana in an average game without assistance to double dump 2 3 costs in 1 turn. And also, there's no guarantee that you get to 3 on time. Nobody in their right mind would keep a 1-lander in most cases, and so you're gonna keep a 2-lander, and then you're not guaranteed your 3rd land on turn 3, because it's 1/3 of your deck and you get 3 draws. I believe it would be technically 4 if you count the turn of, if you're going second as well. So you should get there, but a variance in 3 samples, yeah, you're going to get some variance. I mean, duh, I don't need to tell you this. You play Magic. Occasionally, you're not going to get that 3rd land in 3 draws. And yeah, I mean, you got ramp creatures that also do other things. They tap for mana, they do this, they do that. Single-use mana sources, stuff that taps for 2 eventually. Just there's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do. Plus 1 and 2 cost spells and creatures and whatever that scry to pseudo draw your way to a land. Or outright draw cards, obviously. So, Serum Visions, Anticipate, whatever. You can get lands in your hand or get them out of your way if you already have enough. So those are, very good, obviously. Oh, so just everybody put Scry and Draw in your deck no matter what type of deck it is. No, not really a solution. Very good suggestion, but, build whatever you want. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. And even then, I mean, all the scrying and drawing in the world doesn't mean that there's not 10 non-lands on top of your deck. You know what I mean? We're getting to longer and longer, more distant, more unreliable odds that you would get mana screwed, but that's the point. That's what these cards do. So that's not really a solution, it just helps. It's the most reasonable thing you can do. So I've heard this one before. Everybody starts with 1 basic land in play. That would cheapen 1 cost spells to the point where it's just not even worth it to run one unless it's amazing. Because the whole, and it's a 1-drop, who cares? You're guaranteed, virtually guaranteed to get to 3 at that point, or even 2. Why not just run a 2 cost instead? I'm sure you could find a better one. I mean, what 1 cost is irreplaceable? And yeah, there are examples, it's just not the norm. It wouldn't even really help people from getting land screwed. It would just shift everything up 1, or I should say back 1, depending upon how you want to look at it. A 4 cost spell would be auto include. Of course I'm getting to 4. Just like 3 is right now. And then 3 would be the new 2, 2 would be the new 1, and 1 would just be ignore it. So here's one. Everybody starts with a land in their command zone. Yes, Standard doesn't have a command zone. Guess what? Add it. So it doesn't start in play, which, I mean, that would just if it was actually in play and then on turn 1 you double dropped, and then your opponent started with only 1 in play, and they'd be so far behind you, it just wouldn't be good. But if it was in your command zone, you'd have to play it. That would help slightly, but I still think we're looking at the issue of it's too good of a fix. It's too consistent. It would help people get way too high, which would enable really degenerate crap. And the game gets worse if it's way too easy to cast a spell that's 5 and up. And if it shifts everything back 1 because you're guaranteed 1 land, what if, it's the other 85% of the time and you do draw a proper amount of lands, and then, now you got that free +1, and there you go. And then anybody who didn't, okay, now they'd be playing normal Magic and you'd still have a giant advantage over them. So it's the same thing. You either draw enough lands and then your deck runs perfectly and you win, or you don't, and then you don't win. And so do we just have to give up and say it's part of Magic? I'd say, yeah. But maybe there is a mathematical or logical or like tactical solution out there. I mean, I've heard of people saying, well, if you go more than 2 games with the land drop, and this would only apply to standard because you could do some really messed up crap with this in legacy, vintage, and modern. If you go more than 2 turns without dropping a land, you can just straight up go get one from your library. Drop it into play, maybe tapped, I don't know. I mean, you kind of need it when you need it or you're going to lose. And it's based on the old casino tactic where instead of, oh, we'll give you a free $50 credit, if you come spend 1,000 at our elite VIP blackjack table or whatever. Well, people could abuse it. There's, cycle limits and there's, math and just, it's a constant war between people who really know what they're doing and you trying to get the most out of some kind of free money giveaway, basically. That's basically what casinos do, honestly. So they developed a brilliant idea quite a while ago called it's not a buyback. I actually don't remember what it's called. And honestly, I'm not rich enough to care. And if I was, I sure as hell wouldn't be gambling with the money. It's like a refund credit. So if the player wins, great. That's it. Walk out with the money. But out of 1,000 players, X% of them are not going to win. That's just how math works on a large scale. For every guy that wins, there'll be somebody who lost slightly more to offset it. I mean, that's just how it works on a very, very, very large scale. So how do you attract people? Well, free drinks, free buffets, free hotel stay, free shows, free tickets, this, that, whatever. This perk, that giveaway. Oh, crap, people are using our, point multiplier or whatever, this, that, and the other thing against us, and now they have an advantage and they're losing us money. Oh, my God, what do we do? So in comes the brilliant thing. We'll give you a 20% refund on your losses if you lose. So the only way to benefit from this promotion, which is significant, like people will come in with $100,000 and like lose it, and then they'll get a $20,000 refund in cash on their way out of the casino. That is the agreement that you can negotiate. So if you win, you win. Cool, and then you don't need to make use of it. So the player's like, okay, cool. And then, the player is losing. Like maybe even they showed up with $100,000, they lost 30 of it. Well, then they get 20% of $30,000 back in a credit, but they only get to use it if they already lost. And we're talking buy-in versus buy-out. Otherwise, if it was just on losses, but they also didn't offset wins, like at other machines or tables, it's literally limited to one table. Oh my God, like that, I can't even get into how disastrous that would be and exploitable. And this is coming from the king of casino exploits, me, in case you haven't seen those videos. I basically will just say rip off. Maybe that's not the best term, but I rip off multiple casinos very often because I just take advantage of the mathematical flaws in their promotions, and they don't care because the vast majority of people don't do that. And I do, and they're just like, whatever, write it off as a loss. But anyway, to get back to the point, we need to give somebody a benefit, a free credit, a free here, let's catch up, let's fix this bad situation that they can only take advantage of if they're, quote, losing. So that's where the logic comes from. If somebody goes 2 turns without dropping a land, and I guess, I don't know if you'd prove this, but maybe, make sure that they also don't have one in hand. I mean, it seems like shooting yourself in the foot. And maybe this only applies to the first 6 turns of the game. And then after that, like, why would you be guaranteed a land every 3 turns? Like, I didn't draw one. Cool. Here's my guaranteed free land. And then on top of that, I drew 3 non-lands in its place. So now I have more mana and more cards, and I'm going to win because of this, like, pseudo catch-up law that I don't need. So maybe make it only apply to if you only have 2 lands in play. Like, maybe that would be the solution. But either way, it's like, you are land screwed. Go get a land from your deck. And that's the same logic. It's the same math. It's the same strategy of you get to scry one after you mulligan. As I mentioned earlier, you just blind mull to 6, you lose. I mean, you are almost definitely going to lose. Your disadvantage is insane. I'm not saying you can't turn it around. Even at 5, you can, but it's way less likely. So they made it, you already mulliganed. You're already in the bad. Okay, we're going to give you a refund on the badness. We're going to let you scry once. But you cannot scry once if you kept your first 7 cards. If you're winning. You only need the refund if you're losing. It's brilliant and it works. It's a perfect flawless system, basically. So would it really work in Magic, though? I would say yes. The only thing is, like, turn counting. You'd have to keep a count, and then you and your opponent might argue about, how many did you miss? No, I missed a land drop, so it's only been this many turns, and, whatever. It would be a pain to track. It would be a nightmare to try to enforce at a tournament. So I think from a practical standpoint, no, they can't really implement it. But from a logical standpoint, or maybe do it just online or something where it's auto-tracked, would it be the fix we're looking for? I would say it's about as close as we can get. Now, the other thing that I thought of is whenever you have to discard a card past 7, so you're holding 8 cards in your hand, you may go get a land in its place, but only one, because there's cards that'll let you draw like 17, and then you end up putting like 15 of them in the graveyard. You shouldn't be able to go get 15 lands. So anytime you have to discard due to too many cards in your hand, you can go get 1 land for every time that it happens, or maybe just once per game or something. Because that's another very consistent indicator that you are doing nothing and the game is over and you need some long shot help, because at that point it is a long shot. I don't think your opponent's sitting there doing nothing while you're counting your cards and, oh shit, I got to 8. So what do you think of those two ideas? Should we implement both of them? It's like an emergency, break glass in case of emergency, I'm mana screwed, bail me out kind of thing. Honestly, it's not going to turn around the whole game, and whenever it happens to my opponent, I actually feel bad for them, and I'm like, well, this isn't even a real game. Like, it's like me boxing a blind person. Of course I'm going to win, and I feel damn bad about it. Like, why am I still even participating in this? This is a landslide victory. It's not even fun. I'm not like, yeah, my deck, I built it better. I'm like, for complete luck, my opponent is losing. Just complete luck. Has nothing to do with my skill, my play decisions, nothing. I just outlucked them. I mean, that's great in like poker, because poker is like almost all luck. Like, that's the point. Everybody's on the same page. That's why, ooh, get your heart pumped, because, ooh, am I going to pull the card I need? But in Magic, it's like, it's so decision heavy and deck building heavy. The more we can take luck out of it, the better. But like I said, if you go to the extreme and you go, okay, guaranteed land drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. Like, lands are not even in your deck. They're in a separate deck, and you can play 1 per turn straight up. The decks would be way too consistent. There would be like nearly 0 variance. The only variance would be what cards you pull, and without lands to get in the way, you would pull some pretty consistent cards. I mean, if you get like an 8-8 combo going and your deck's only 39 cards or whatever, you're going to pull the combo. I mean, it's virtually guaranteed. If they did that, bare minimum, they'd have to drop down to 3 max of a card in a deck. And even that, I don't think would do it. If you could just take generic red blitz rush with creatures and or just red burn and guarantee it land, it'll win every time if the cards are good enough. Well, unless somebody's playing like, early counter spells, or they go first and have lifelink, or just whatever. But it's such a binary condition. You go first or you don't. You win or you don't, because of that. So it'd be boring, and you got to have some luck in there. And I will say, I mean, the better you build your deck, the more luck shrinks. I mean, the more probability, the more likely you are to pull the right cards, the more of the right cards you have, the less you rely on 4/4 card combos, and the more scry and the more draw to enhance your luck, I guess you would say. Not really. To like mathematically cheat your way past luck. That all helps. Yes, I'm saying building your deck correctly helps. Imagine that. And I think that's where the fun and the dynamicness should come from. It shouldn't just be, whoops, I got land screwed. Whoops, my opponent got land screwed. Well, there's the outcome of the game right there. It just feels bad, man. Feels bad, man. Just like the meme says, when the game is over on turn 3 because probably turn 5, because on turn 3 you stop drawing land. So I would love to hear from you guys. Is there a better alternative? Have you heard of a better idea from somebody else? Is there another card game that nailed it? I mean, there's one I got to mention, Pokemon. They use basically, energy. I mean, it's basically mana. It's basically lands. So all they did was kill the whole 1 at a time thing. The whole, I'm going to draw 1 card at a time. That's stupid. They've got so many, like, energy from the graveyard back into play cards. Like, tons of them. They've got, I think, like, creatures. Pokemon. Well, same thing. They can like grab an energy out of the graveyard, and then you've got like trainer cards that equate to like redraw your entire hand, or like go fetch 1 or 2 energy from your library and just drop them into your hand or drop them into play. They just made it so easy to get that you can control. Like, you draw anything and be like, okay, cool, I'm going to have a better shot. I'm going to have another shot. And you get enough shots at it that you'll get enough energy unless you have the worst luck ever. And that is how hypergeometric distribution works. If you look at a hypergeometric calculator, you take more shots at it, you're going to up your odds of it not backfiring. I mean, it's really just that simple. You buy 2 lottery tickets, you are twice as likely to win. I mean, it's just that. So they just let you draw so many cards, cycle so many cards, scry so many cards, resurrect so many cards, fetch so many cards, tutor so many cards, whatever you want to say, that energy isn't that hard to get. It's a thing. You got to worry about it. If your whole deck's high energy, you got to be real careful about it. It can backfire. It's just so much less likely. And I think Pokemon still has a partial mulligan rule. I don't even remember. Upping the sheer volume of scry and draw, that would just enable people to do these like hyper degenerate combos. Like you could get off a 3-card combo if you got triple the scry and triple the draw. Like people would be doing, infinite crap. It would be a joke. So it works for that game because of how it's structured and how combat is structured and how there really are next to no actual true like card combos. Like at least not to the extent of Magic. But it was an interesting way to fix it, where it's still part of the game, it's still some variance, but if you built your deck right, you're just not going to not have enough energy. It's just unheard of. So that is an interesting case study, but if there's another game out there where they do have lands be a thing and they fixed it, or they have maybe cards that boost your mana tier and you've got to get those out so it is like a usable creature in combat, but it's also like a dual purpose land, I think maybe there might be something there. So let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I will see you next video.